Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for showing up. Uh, if you don't get enough fun out of this, we're doing this 3 times during winter breakout. So, um, you know, more fun than a barrel of monkeys. I made some slides just to try to make sure that I don't miss things, I guess. Um, yeah, here they are. How is everyone? Hmm. So fine. Uh, Welcome. The associate deans and I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of the things that were going on with uh, the integrity policy and uh, things like that. So, so there you go. Um, right. Uh, so I I gave John these bullet points for our pathway to enlightenment. Um, I hope that the why reporting matters is not something that anyone here needs to be aware of, but reporting matters for many reasons, the institutional high-minded reasons, as well as the if you're not reporting it, then we have no ability to uh, track if people are exhibiting serial behavior. So, um, in a perfect world, you're looking out for this, you're reporting this, the reporting is easy, and we take it from there. That's basically what it is. Um, we have moved to implementation of using Starfish as our reporting tool rather than Maxient. The Maxient form still exists. The link is still on the website. Hopefully that will go away. But regardless of how you're reporting, we're receiving those reports and it's good. But the reason that we are moving to Starfish is mainly because it's a hell of a lot easier on the person reporting. So I'm just going to go through the quick steps of the reporting process that we would ideally like you to follow. Um, 4 easy pieces. If you've satisfied yourself that a violation has or may have occurred, the first thing to do is talk to the student about it. Um, if you're in an online class, I understand that that can be more challenging. If the student is being evasive, I understand that that can be challenging, but you at least have to make an effort to let the student know that you want to talk to them about something. Um, if you get to the point of talking to the student, you're saying, I have this concern, and you're giving them the opportunity to say, oh, no, you got it all wrong. Um, you can talk about penalty at that point, but really the more important part is just that you're gathering information. You shouldn't be making it seem like you've already made up your mind. Next, again, in a perfect world, you're open with your chair or uh, program director at this point. That not because we're hoping that someone's going to dissuade you from doing something or whatever, but rather the chair is the person who's going to have to deal with the consequences if the student appeals it. And it's always good to be from a position of some understanding rather than where did this come from. At some point, you make a decision, you have to communicate that decision to the student. You can't just move about your business and let that stay hanging there. This is whether there is an academic penalty or not. And then you're submitting your violation report in Starfish. So hopefully all of you are aware of the existence of Starfish. That would be a good start. Starfish is good because you can look up your student or students Any student who is attached to you, that is, you have them in a class that you're teaching, will show up and you'll get the initial screen, and there will be the flag uh, button. When you press the flag button, the first thing that comes up is academic integrity violation. When you click on academic integrity violation, it gives you two things that you have to do. One is that you have to put whether it's in the context of your course or not, duh. And the second is your commentary. And for the commentary, all we want, no manifesto, no story of how this class came into being. A couple of sentences is generally okay to describe the nuts and bolts of what happened. It would be useful to have something about what the violation took place on. Was it a quiz? Was it a discussion post? Was it a paper? It is important to us to know when you talk to the student whether they gave any signs of accepting responsibility, or indeed if you are unable to meet with the student. It would be good to include what you're doing for a penalty and if you've mentioned this to one of us. At this point, when you press go on this, it records the violation. Violation report is not seen by advisors. It's not seen by students. It's seen only by the associate deans. So we all see them. So I see if someone violates in the School of Business, and Carol sees if someone violates in CLAS, which is good because we automatically have a little foreknowledge of larger things happening. But at this point, if there's something, if things are too brief, if it doesn't make sense to us, we can reach out to you and say, hey, can you clarify what went on with this or that? And that's really all we want. It's good to save the information on any violation that takes place for your class in case there is an appeal. But this process doesn't require you to attach this, attach that, and highlight all these other things. We will be putting into governance a modification of the integrity policy. A number of changes are made that are streamlining, that are clarifying. Not a lot procedurally changes in this. The biggest single thing is that in consultation with the Student Conduct Office, they've basically been removed from the process. They've more or less said, we don't think that it's appropriate for student conduct to be messing in academic affairs, and they just don't see their role in the things that we do necessarily. So mention of faculty discussing things with student conduct or student conduct proceedings are all gone out of that. There's one nexus in which we have to be in contact with student conduct, and that is with XE grades. So the catalog at the moment says that a student has received an academic penalty, blah, blah, blah. It defines what the XE grade is. It says that the XE designation may only be applied by student conduct. That remains consistent. There's a blurb after that that I don't think we agree with. So our preferred wording of the second paragraph there is that the XE designation may only be applied by student conduct and with the academic safety. This is stuff that instructors don't have to worry about. This is something that is applied as an institutional consequence above and beyond whatever the student has received in the class. So this is the thing that is received when we view something as singularly egregious or that it reflects the culmination of a pattern of behavior and we're stepping in. So again, from the faculty side, you don't have to do anything. You have to police the individual violation in your course, and that's it. And since we've got Liz Schmidt here, she can tell us about considerations of unethical AI use and its detection. um, yeah, that's a sort of a topic unto itself. I will say that in the revised policy statement, there is a paragraph devoted to generative AI, and it basically says that instructors have the authority to police AI use in their classes as they see fit, and individual syllabi are going to be the guidance that students will be following. So yeah. So the main point of the winter breakout sessions is not necessarily for me to talk at you. It's for you to ask questions. So having given you the little bit of view of what things are like in the world of integrity, I will open it up for questions that Kristin and Rebecca and Carol can take.
You say that we have authority when it comes to academic violations due to AI use. What tools, what procedures do we have access to in terms of policing AI use? Like, should we be prepared to download ChatGPT, OpenAI, all these other AI programs to see if students might have been using those programs, if we get similar results from same prompts? Should we be policing homework assignments, take-home midterms using these? What authorities do we have? In the past, we've had very limited access when it comes to academic violation by take-home assignment, like Chegg or Course Hero. We can't get into those ourselves without paying out of our own pocket to get the accounts necessary to get these tools. Do we have any kind of resources at our disposal when it comes to AI violation?
Well, I'll give you my words of wisdom on this, and it's that there is no tool out there that will allow you to say, yes, this has been generated by AI, so I can apply this penalty. So there have been, in CLAS, at least during the semester, there have been a number of students who have been given violations on the suspicion that AI was used for assignment or assignments. And I have real problems with that because unless a student says, yes, I use ChatGPT for this assignment, here's why, I think it's good to have the conversation rather than just to level the accusation. But if you have the conversation and the student says, no, I didn't, I wrote this myself, and just because the tone is different or just because this looks similar to what you generated when you use the free version of ChatGPT, it doesn't prove anything. And I don't see that we're in a position of litigating that. Um, I think that a lot of it is about constructing your course in a way to try to minimize the impact of that. But, Liz and John can correct me. I don't think that there is a tool that's available that, um, that really can pin anything like that down categorically.
That
I
said,
wish I had
right,
better news.
there are ways to demonstrate sometimes that AI has been used. For example, AI often imagines sources. So if it's a research paper and you check the sources and they don't exist, like that's a pretty good demonstration that like AI has been used. And we certainly have had cases where that has been the case, right? So, that's one way that, AI usage can be proven, right? Is like these sources don't exist. The end.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
these are
like
that's falsification.
Sorry, Michael Murphy has a question I wanted to make.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to add to this. It's useful for me to hear you say that, Paul, because I really haven't had a sense of how the associate deans felt about this sense sort of a proof. And I'd agree that it's hard to sort of defend it. It's not like cut and paste plagiarism. where you can pretty definitively establish an improper use of sources. But the things, Michael, that you say, and to Rebecca, though, I think my sense is that AI is a moving target. It's changing relatively fast, and so it doesn't necessarily make up sources at the rate that it used to. I think is a little better about that. It's better about a lot of things. Still, there are signs that a student's been using AI when they write. And so, Michael, I think you're totally right. I think one of the best ways to do this is to generate some prompt that you think a student may have used, and to find it will generate not identical but quite similar language. I know that in English 102, we've seen students do this, and when we've approached them about it, they sort of like quickly, I think they're astonished at how similar the language can be. And so I think that's a really powerful tool. There are also like lots of AI tics. It likes certain kinds of words. It likes certain kinds of sentence structures. Like it likes like 3-part lists, this, that, and the other thing that have a certain sort of parallelism about form. It isn't difficult kind of to spot. And again, I think to my mind as writing across curriculum coordinator, the real issue is to work as closely with your students as you can. I know that's difficult kind of. It's hard to devote lots of time to sort of the written work of students, but both at the level of process and development of the idea, and then kind of at the level of knowing them as writers to whatever extent you can, and really responding to their text, I think is really useful. Is the way to sort of address a lot of this.
Yep, I completely agree. As much as the smart cheater is going to very effectively cover their tracks, I think that if you have the good relationship with the student in the class from the start, and you say, I'm concerned about this, what can you tell me? That you have the ability to make that conversation be more than just I'm going to bust you on this, but why did you feel that you needed to do this? And, are you going to do this on other assignments? And, this was a 1% assignment, so perhaps I don't really care about it, but the point of the bigger assignment is, your own critical thought as opposed to just coming up with something. So I think being able to have the honest conversation with students is essential.
I would add to that, as Liz put in the chat, that having a policy written in your syllabus helps to sort of clarify that, right? So that when you have the student come in and talk to you, you can say, look, it clearly says you can't use generative AI for this assignment, or what the parameters are for using that. There seems to be, something not right here, or just talking to the student. And it seems that a lot of times the students will, when they know it's a conversation, and they have an opportunity, possibly you're going to choose to have them redo that assignment or not get any credit for that assignment, but they still have other ways to still pass the course. I think that's a pathway to reconciling that difference and helping students understand what the integrity issue is at hand.
Yeah.
I think one other thing to consider too is that students want to explore the technology. They want to explore things like AI. And so introducing AI as a tool to use in ways that you can use it ethically and in interesting ways in your discipline, where it can be productive and not disrupt the learning, right? But like can enhance the learning, can actually be a good way to bring in AI where students like can see like, oh, this is a place where it can be useful, and then maybe prevent it from being used in places where it's not useful, right? Where it would be more a case of cheating. And sometimes they just don't see where it can be productive, or they think like, oh, it's just used to like write a thing, rather than like, oh, it can be a partner to brainstorm or some other ways that it might be a more useful tool. And I've had success with students in like using it in some other kinds of ways, and then they use it in a more productive way, in a more useful way. in a way that might be more aligned with how it would be used in the field or in the discipline professionally than the ways that maybe they were thinking that it would be used, where they were thinking it would be like a shortcut. And it would actually maybe save time and be a way that would actually help them be more efficient in certain ways, but they just weren't able to see how it would be, how it might efficiently help them in their process.
Just pretending that it doesn't exist or pretending that it only exists as a cancer on society, probably not the best way of approaching it. And, you know, when they get out into the post-academic world, it's there. And they're knowing something more about it than this is a bad thing and only bad people use it. You know, maybe it would be good for them to have seen it used in an academic context. What else? If you've had enough of this, there will be plenty more on whenever our next exposition is. Is that on Friday? Yeah, Friday.
Paul, can I ask two
Right.
really, what I think will be really quick questions?
Sure.
The XE designation, that's maybe the tougher question. It sounds like that will be used only in cases where it's decided that this is like a repeat offender. These are serious cases, and so there needs to be some sort of permanent mark. Is that okay? So it won't, faculty shouldn't be worried that, you know, whatever they do will result, any report will result in sort of some permanent strike on them. Okay.
Yeah.
Secondly was just, is it okay? Can I download and circulate those slides in the English department? I think it would be useful for people to have a sense of, maybe it's available somewhere I'm not aware of, but.
Yeah, I attempted to make a PDF of them before this and failed, so I'll just send you directly my my slides for this.
That would be a more accessible format, Paul, so that would be better.
Thank you.
Well, for those of you who are unaware, Rebecca Mushter is the SUNY, what is it? The friend of accessibility, the
Nobody cares, Paul.
grand of accessibility.
The accessibility
We are
guru,
very honored.
queen of
Accessibility.
accessibility.
All right, anything else for the good of the order? I think this was supposed to be 20 minutes, so we don't want to get John cross at us. All right, if you haven't had enough, then Friday morning, see us there.
Thank you.
Everyone.